On Christmas Eve in 2002, a young woman, 8 months pregnant, disappeared without a sign. Her spouse mentioned he had gone fishing, but the country would soon inquire, was he grieving for his spouse or concealing the reality? It began as a missing persons investigation that unsettled Modesto, California. Yet, within a few days, it erupted into one of the most notorious murder inquiries in contemporary American history. The tale of Laci Peterson involves treachery, hidden lives, and a suburban area that turned into the focus of nationwide obsession. In this video, we're exploring the complete timeline of Laci's vanishing, from the initial warning signs to the disturbing evidence discovered months afterward, and the trial that split public opinion. A devoted wife, an unborn child, a charming husband, and a single December morning that changed everything. Let's rewind to where it all began. Laci Denise Rocha Peterson came into the world on May 4, 1975 in Modesto, California. She was raised in a tight-knit family, amidst almond orchards, sunshine, and the type of small-town warmth where everyone was acquainted. Friends depicted her as cheerful, vivacious, and exceptionally kind, someone who could illuminate a room simply with her smile. By the late 1990s, Laci had crafted a life that appeared as if it were taken from a storybook. She encountered Scott Peterson when they were both attending California Polytechnic State University. He was attractive, charismatic, and driven, a golf lover with grand aspirations. The connection was immediate. Friends mentioned that Laci realized from the beginning that Scott was the one. One friend would later remember, she often discussed the idea of having a family with him. She envisioned their future with such clarity. Following 2 years of dating, they tied the knot in 1997 and returned to Modesto, purchasing a lovely single-story house in a premium neighborhood. Laci adorned each corner on her own, inviting hues, comfortable furnishings, and a kitchen that wafted the aroma of freshly baked cookies. She enjoyed throwing dinner gatherings and pampering her friends. Scott, on the other hand, was employed as a fertilizer sales representative, frequently traveling for work. By 2002, the couple was anticipating their first child, a son they intended to name Conner. Laci was around 8 months along, radiant and thrilled for the festivities. She had already chosen Christmas stockings for each of them. Yet despite the flawless appearance, there were imperfections, initially subtle and easy to overlook. Scott's friends observed that he frequently appeared emotionally detached. He wasn't the exceptionally loving spouse that others perceived from the outside. Although Laci felt thrilled about the pregnancy, Scott confided to some friends that he wasn't particularly thrilled about becoming a father. Just weeks prior to Laci's disappearance, Scott nonchalantly remarked to someone that this would be his first Christmas without Laci. Nobody understood what he was implying. It seemed like an odd verbal mistake, yet later detectives would play that phrase repeatedly. Laci dedicated the day to completing errands, styling her hair, shopping for groceries, organizing for the family Christmas feast. She went to see her half-sister, Amy, at the salon. Scott also visited the salon to collect a gift basket for Amy, informing her he intended to go fishing the following morning at the Berkeley Marina. Amy thought it strange. It wasn't precisely the season for fishing, and it was Christmas Eve. Scott was laid back, at ease, even appealing. Everything appeared to be fine at first glance. That night, Laci had a phone conversation with her mother, Sharon Rocha. They discussed vacation arrangements, meals, and Laci's excitement about finally becoming a mother. She was in great spirits, Sharon would later say. She wasn't stressed, she wasn't worried, she was just happy. It would be the last conversation Sharon ever had with her daughter. Scott mentioned that he and Laci shared a peaceful breakfast the following morning. She intended to clean the floors, make some cookies, and take their golden retriever Mackenzie for a walk prior to going to her mother's house that afternoon. Scott mentioned that he subsequently drove to the Berkeley Marina, roughly 90 miles distant, to fish by himself. He asserted that he set his small boat afloat and spent several hours there before going back home. However, upon his return at about 4:30 p.m., Laci was missing. The home was hauntingly silent. Her vehicle remained in the driveway. The dog was discovered in the backyard, still wearing his leash, as though he had been brought back by another person. Neighbors claimed to have seen Mackenzie roaming the street at approximately 10:30 a.m. with a leash trailing behind him, but nobody spotted Laci. Scott took a shower, put on fresh clothes, and had pizza. He subsequently contacted Laci's mother, not the police, to nonchalantly inquire if Laci was at her home. When Sharon claimed she wasn't, fear took over. By 6 p.m., Laci Peterson was officially declared missing. Within hours, a large-scale search was initiated by Modesto police. Numerous volunteers participated, searching through fields, parks, and waterways. Helicopters hovered above. Posters covered each lamppost. Laci's cheerful grin reflected from television screens nationwide. This was not merely another missing individual. She was in her 8th month of pregnancy. Time was essential. Scott showed up at the initial press conference, donning sunglasses and speaking softly. His tone was collected, perhaps too collected, some believed. He did not weep. He didn't deliver an enthusiastic request. "Laci, if you can hear this, we love you. Please come home," he said softly. For some, it came across as composed. For others, it was chilling. In the days after Laci Peterson went missing, the calm city of Modesto became the focus of a national enigma. News trucks lined the roads. Journalists stationed themselves outside the Peterson residence. The search teams widened their search area, and in the background, investigators started constructing a timeline that initially appeared straightforward. Yet the more they examined, the weirder it grew. Scott informed the police that he departed his residence at approximately 9:30 a.m. to fish at the Berkeley Marina. He mentioned he came back by late afternoon, saw that Laci was missing, took a shower, had some pizza, and called her mom. However, minor discrepancies started to appear almost right away. Residents reported witnessing Scott putting a sizable object, concealed by a tarp, into the rear of his truck that morning. Nobody truly witnessed Laci taking the dog for a walk that day. Scott's fishing excuse aroused suspicion. Who goes fishing solo, 90 miles away, on Christmas Eve? When investigators inquired about his fishing target, Scott was unaware of which fish were currently in season. And then the most significant early hint appeared, the place of his alibi. When Scott mentioned he'd been at the Berkeley Marina, investigators quietly noted it. At that point, it was just a location. But months later, it would become the most chilling part of the entire case. In every missing persons situation, the partner is always examined first. That's the normal protocol. However, Scott's actions didn't help him at all. While volunteers worked diligently, Scott was spotted playing golf. He steered clear of media engagements, aside from short, impassive comments. He informed Laci's family that he intended to sell the house just weeks after she went missing. Investigators also observed something strange: Scott's absence of inquiries. He never inquired of investigators, "Do you have any clues?" or "What's your next step?" Questions that nearly every anxious spouse commonly poses. One investigator later remarked, "It seemed as though he was disconnected. He didn't behave like a man whose wife was expecting and missing." A burglary took place just 2 doors away from the Peterson residence, around the same time Laci went missing. 2 men were subsequently apprehended for the offense, sparking some speculation. Might Laci have interrupted the theft and been taken? It was an intriguing concept. The thieves were working in the vicinity. Laci was recognized for walking her dog in the late morning. Perhaps she witnessed something she ought not to have. However, the schedule didn't align. The break-in was ultimately verified to have occurred on December 26th, 2 days following Laci's disappearance. Detectives dismissed it, yet for the public, it remained one of the most reiterated alternate theories for years. Since Scott had referenced fishing at the Berkeley Marina, authorities discreetly performed water searches in the San Francisco Bay. Divers, sonar equipment, and cadaver dogs were deployed. Initially, they discovered nothing. Yet experienced detectives had an instinctive sense. When someone volunteers a very specific, unusual location as their alibi, one detective said, "You mark that place on the map." They didn't know it yet, but they were looking in exactly the right spot. As the investigation continued, a bombshell dropped that shifted everything. A woman named Amber Frey, a massage therapist from Fresno, contacted the Modesto Police Department. She told them she had been dating Scott Peterson for weeks while Laci was missing. Even more shocking, Scott had told Amber that he was single, and that his wife had died. Not disappeared, not separated, died. He told me this would be his first Christmas without his wife, Amber recalled in a press conference. That was December 9th. Laci disappeared on December 24th. Amber consented to don a wire and capture her discussions with Scott for the authorities. For weeks on end, Scott kept contacting her, murmuring sweet words, devising romantic schemes, all while his wife was absent, and the whole country was searching for her. In a notorious call, during a New Year's Eve vigil for Laci, he informed Amber that he was in Paris, celebrating. The truth? He stood among the crowd, candle held aloft, pretending. This marked the pivotal moment. Scott Peterson was more than a husband in mourning. He was leading a dual existence. Although the incident created a negative impression, investigators still required solid proof. Their attention was directed towards Scott bought a boat just weeks prior to Laci's disappearance, a fact unknown to Laci's friends. Scott confessed to creating cement anchors. He claimed he created one anchor for his boat, but evidence indicated he had made multiple, and the others were gone. Laci's hair, discovered on a set of pliers aboard Scott's vessel. They also observed something unsettling. Scott's fishing path at the Berkeley Marina closely matched where, months later, Laci and Conner's remains would ultimately be discovered. During the investigation, Scott didn't keep a low profile. Rather, he dyed his hair blonde, grew a goatee, bought a new car, and carried $15,000 in cash, multiple cell phones, camping gear, and his brother's ID. Authorities suspected he was getting ready to escape. Scott maintained that he was only trying to steer clear of media focus. However, when he was apprehended months afterwards, he was close to the Mexican border. As the media excitement escalated, bizarre theories spread. Some claimed that a satanic cult had taken Laci for a ceremony. Some speculated about random kidnappings or a serial murderer preying on expectant mothers. None of these theories stood up to examination. There was an absence of physical proof, no trend of comparable offenses, and no reliable witnesses backing them. In a case as sensational as this, every shadow became a potential suspect. By spring 2003, several months had gone by without a significant advancement. However, in the background, detectives were constructing a circumstantial case incrementally. Scott was not interested in the obligations of being a father and was currently exploring a new relationship. That morning, he was by himself with Laci. His tale of fishing positioned him at the precise spot where the bodies were discovered. His deception towards Amber, indifference, and potential escape all created a negative impression. There was no crime scene available. They lacked a weapon for the murder. However, they possessed a narrative that was logical. On April 13, 2003, the bay revealed its secret. Two distinct bodies came ashore close to the Berkeley Marina, the precise location where Scott had gone fishing. One was the body of a woman, later identified as Laci Peterson. She was so significantly decomposed that no conclusive cause of death could be established. The other was a male fetus, still safeguarded in the womb, recognized as baby Conner. His umbilical cord remained connected. Investigators thought Laci's body had been submerged for months, appearing only after storms altered the currents. It was no longer a mystery, remarked one detective. All signs led back to that. It wasn't a mystery anymore, said one detective. Everything pointed back to that marina. On April 18, 2003, Scott Peterson was arrested near a golf course in La Jolla, California. He was driving his mother's car, dyed hair, $15,000 cash, camping equipment, multiple phones, and his brother's driver's license in hand. It was over. But the real battle was only beginning. The trial. The apprehension of Scott Peterson in April 2003 concluded the search, but initiated one of the most publicized murder trials of the early 2000s. The courthouse was flooded with media. Satellite vehicles filled the roads. Every advancement captured national attention. This was not merely a murder trial. It was an exhibition. Scott faced 2 murder charges, one for Laci and another for their unborn child, Conner. Prosecutors declared their intent to pursue the death penalty. The prosecution's approach was evident. Scott Peterson murdered his expectant wife to evade his obligations in life. They created an image of a man seeking freedom, who wished to avoid fatherhood and perceived murder as his escape. He was leading two lives, the prosecutor informed the jury, one alongside his spouse and one alongside his lover. Then on December 24th, he picked one. They presented the circumstantial evidence in a manner that seemed almost like a puzzle falling into alignment. Scott bought a boat only weeks prior to Laci's disappearance, keeping it a secret from everyone. He created several cement anchors, but just one was discovered. Authorities suspected he enlisted the others to anchor Laci's body in the bay. He continuously deceived both Amber Frey and Laci's relatives. He fished precisely at the spot where the bodies were eventually discovered. The prosecution was not required to demonstrate how Scott killed Laci. They had to demonstrate that all his actions prior to and following indicated his culpability. Scott's recorded phone conversations with Amber Frey were also presented in court. The jury heard Scott quietly speak to Amber about affection in Paris, while search crews combed fields for his absent wife. It was like listening to someone living in a completely different reality, one juror later said. It was chilling. Scott's legal team contended that there was no direct proof linking him to the crime of murder. No blood, no armament, no witnesses. They placed significant emphasis on the burglary theory, indicating that Laci might have been taken by unknown individuals after she left home to walk her dog. They also challenged the timeline, noting that a neighbor supposedly saw Laci alive on the morning of December 24th. The witness stated that she saw her walking Mackenzie. If accurate, that would have occurred after Scott departed for the marina, possibly exonerating him. However, the prosecution argued that the witness had incorrect information about the date, which is a frequent error in rapid investigations, and that there were no other reliable sightings backing her assertion. The motive was central to the trial. What would lead Scott Peterson to kill his expectant wife only weeks before their son's arrival? The response was not theatrical, it was self-serving. He desired a life free from obligations, a fresh love story, a new beginning. Amber Frey embodied the life he desired, while Laci symbolized the life he sought to flee. He didn't want a divorce, the prosecutor argued. He wanted her gone. Following months of testimonies, media frenzy, and national fixation, the jury delivered a verdict on November 12, 2004. Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder in Laci Peterson's death and convicted of second-degree murder in the death of baby Conner. The courtroom burst into noise. A few of Laci's relatives cried tears of relief. Some merely remained silent, weary from 2 years of trauma. Scott displayed no apparent feelings. On December 13, 2004, the jury advised the death sentence. The judge officially condemned Scott Peterson to death by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison. This defendant violated his duty to his wife, his unborn child, and his community, the judge stated. To achieve that, he must confront the greatest consequence. The verdict was the peak moment the community had anticipated. To many, it seemed that justice had been delivered. However, some still had persistent uncertainties. The murder weapon was never discovered. Nobody actually witnessed Scott perpetrate the offense. It was a situational case, though a significant one. Years later, some would ask if the media hype affected the jury more than the actual evidence. It was like a modern-day witch trial, one legal analyst said. He may have been guilty, but he never stood a chance in that courtroom. The sentencing of Scott Peterson concluded one of the most observed episodes in contemporary American true crime. However, the narrative continued beyond the verdict. Scott was moved to San Quentin State Prison, the death row in California. There he was assigned inmate number C9730, residing in a 4-by-9-foot cell that overlooked the bay where prosecutors claimed he disposed of his wife's body. For years, he lodged appeals, asserting he was denied a fair trial due to extensive media coverage and supposed misconduct by jurors. In 2020, after almost 20 years on death row, the California Supreme Court nullified his death sentence, pointing out mistakes in jury selection. Nevertheless, his convictions for murder were sustained. In 2021, Scott Peterson received a new sentence of life imprisonment without the option of parole. He is still incarcerated today, proclaiming his innocence. For Laci's family, achieving justice demanded a significant sacrifice. They faced 2 years of unyielding media attention, disturbing details in court, and a betrayal that broke their reality. Sharon Rocha, the mother of Laci, emerged as a vocal supporter of victims' rights. In 2004, she advocated for the enactment of Laci and Conner's Law, a federal statute that acknowledges the homicide of a fetus as an independent crime when a federal offense is perpetrated against an expectant mother. Sharon stated that they aimed to ensure Conner's life was recognized. He was cherished. His significance was undeniable. Do you believe Scott Peterson's conviction relied on strong evidence, or was it influenced by media scrutiny and public anger? If you found this case as intriguing and eerie as I did, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss a detailed exploration like this.